Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. Today, my guest is Bill Williams, a former CEO, leadership advisor who, despite building a successful life and career, reached a point where he had to confront something many men quietly feel, which is why when everything looks fine on the outside, does something still feel missing underneath? So, welcome to you, Bill.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So let's start, Bill, by, when you look back at the younger version of yourself, chasing hard, chasing career, where do you think that drive came from?
Well, childhood, I suppose, because I don't remember it not being there. It was always normal for me to feel driven. Probably, I'm saying childhood, probably after school, actually. I think once I moved into the workplace, then I didn't do particularly well at school. I probably wasn't that engaged at school. But as soon as I moved into the place of work, then that's when I just felt driven from the first day of an apprenticeship. And just flat out in everything I did and constantly chasing the next thing and frustrated with people that didn't really understand how people couldn't want to have that push, constantly pushing myself to the next thing. Never stopped.
And I know we've spoken a couple of times in advance of this, and I know both of us share a similar sort of trauma, I guess, from our much younger years. Do you think, what sort of impact do you think that had on you trying to, be the best that you can and working really hard to achieve success?
Yeah, that's really good. I suppose one of the reasons for wanting to share my story really is that, now I work with leaders. And when I was 9, my father died in a car crash on the way to work. And I just, I've had therapy many, many years later in the last 5 years. And, my life froze at that point, which apparently is quite a normal way for a young person to react to an event like that. And although it doesn't make sense, it does to me. The work I did kind of on I told myself a story that my dad, basically, I was a disappointment to him. Such a disappointment that he decided not to be around, which is crazy. But if you've been telling yourself that story, so what's been driving me, I think, until my late 50s, not in a good or a bad way, but just is this desire to prove to my dad that I was good enough.
And this was you told yourself this story. This is your coping mechanism.
Philip, it's not a story I told myself. And then I did some work with a brilliant coach 2 or 3 years ago who said, could this be a story you've been telling yourself? Could this be what's been driving you? And I don't ever remember telling myself that story. But when it was played back to me, I thought, wow, yeah, that's why I had that perfectionist streak. That's why I had to get the next job. That's why no job was ever big enough. Because how can you prove yourself to somebody that's dead? And, when I work with a lot of leaders, it's very common that sort of, not necessarily those precise words, but that sense of loss and grief that people have had when parents have split up is common in some of the men that I work with.
Do you think it's a bit of a blame? Do you think it's almost trying to blame yourself or find a way of blaming yourself for something that happened that was clearly not your fault?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. A 9-year-old's experience of something is very different to a 50-year-old's experience of something. So the stories you might tell yourself and not discuss it with anybody, and maybe it's just locked away. But it's certainly when I've shared this and through some of the people, as I say, I'm working with, it rings a bell and people say, yeah, I'd have never described it that way. But I think where there's been, and Philip, we've had the conversation of your experience, but where there's been a divorce or a marital breakdown and obviously both parents are still alive, then there's more cognizance of, well, what was my role in this? Maybe I wasn't good enough, etc., etc. And there's also, I think, the behavior of the parents with regard to how much that instills. But one of the key things for me is this, I haven't had an unhappy life, but other than some incredible moments, such as when your children are born and getting married and things like that, have I experienced joy on a regular basis? No, because I was too tight, too hard on myself, too pushing, too constantly thinking when I hit the next thing, everything will be okay. And you don't think when I hit the next thing, I'll be living a life of pure joy. You're just on this treadmill. And it's not the best way to live your life. And it's not the best way to perform either as a father, as a partner, as a leader.
But from the outside looking in essence, you had a career, family, perceived success, achievements, recognition, all these sorts of things. Did you always feel this inability to find the joy in most of that? Or was it something that happened at a certain point in your life? Did you suddenly think, hold on, something's not right here?
Yeah, I've had as I say, I got a fabulous, I've had a coach for over 20 years as a CEO. I came across an incredible coach 3 years ago that really was a sort of, some people might describe it as a spiritual enlightenment, but it's opened my eyes to, Philip, if you'd said to me age 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and any time before that, is there anything wrong with you? I just said, well, of course not. I'm a driven chief executive. I'm a leader. Everything I take on, I give it my all. I absolutely love it, etc., etc., etc. I'd have a really polished verbatim around the answer to those sort of questions. And it wouldn't be because I was thinking I was not telling you the truth. It would just, it's like, well, how else could you live? And it's only, I think the other thing for me is I decided a couple of years ago to step out of a full-time CEO role and lean into this practice of working with leaders and chief execs. And what I hadn't prepared myself for was when the scaffolding of the seat of the CEO was taken away. Although I thought I'd prepared for most things, the busy diary and all that sort of stuff, what I hadn't really prepared myself for was the silence that replaces it. And that causes you have to stop and introspect. And if I reflect back now when I was full steam ahead being a CEO or a director and building up to those positions, you never stop. So you never have to face the silence.
And how much is that related to identity, do you think, or how much versus how much is it related to perhaps knowing who you really are? Maybe they're the same thing.
No, I don't think they are the same thing, actually. I think I'm not sure who the quote belongs to, but, the answers that you seek are in the silence that you're avoiding is a really powerful thing. And I think, for me, my coping mechanism for my life's stories, and I've told you one, but there are others, and not good or bad, they just are. My coping mechanism was my career. And so my career allowed me to have that focus, have a purpose, have a passion, etc., but fundamentally never stop to start asking the fundamental questions about myself to myself. And it's an avoidance tactic. And I think, you know, some it's a hypothesis, but some other people might find other ways to deal with that, and that could be, I don't know, alcohol, drugs, sport. You know, how often do you hear of really successful sports people finally winning the gold medal or finally achieving what they wanted to achieve, and then there's this crash. Um, so I think it's and what makes it harder in some ways is that as you become more successful, either as a business owner or as a leader in business, then you get more and more accolades, you employ more and more people, you become a a bigger person in the context of who you are, and which is a facade, by the way. But everybody around you kind of looks up to you in that respect. You get used to that. So to then turn around and say, actually, I'm using this because I'm not 100% inside. I'm not, is where do you go to have that conversation? Because everybody's telling you how great you are and how fantastic it must feel. And when you're in those moments, and then there's been highlights, don't get me wrong. I've been to Buckingham Palace. I've been won various awards, etc., etc. I never felt joy in those moments. Never. Um, I just you're already moving on to the next thing because although I never I never stopped to think. Hang on a minute. I thought I was going to be okay when I got here. I told myself a story when I was an apprentice. I remember saying to a friend, and we were about 20 years old, and I was going back to night school, and he said, "Oh, leave it. Let's go for a drink." And I said, "No, I'm going back. I've forgotten this story." And he said to me, I said, "Why are you going back to do this steam calculations as part of an engineering apprenticeship?" And I said, "Well, the I want to be a chief executive." And this was with Michelin. And I said, the chief executive of Michelin earns £120,000 a year. This 40 years ago. And I said, I want to be a chief executive. And he looked at me as if I was daft. And I don't remember saying that. And, you know, when I become a director of a big company, when I become a managing director, done it all, every single step. And although I wasn't consciously thinking, oh, when this happens, then I'll be happy. That's the story I was telling myself. So it's Philip, it's like an operating system that's running away in the background. You're not that conscious of it, but it's there all the time.
So why do you think, and many men listening to this will probably relate to what you're saying, you know, always waiting for the next thing, the next promotion, the next, holiday, whatever it might be. And then you feel, right, that's it. I'm finally happy. Why do you think, you know, you're not feeling what's preventing you from feeling that joy? I mean, you just talked a little bit about this, you know, taking on more responsibilities. You think it's a bit like a drug. You just want to take on more, you know, do things faster, be more successful. You caught in a kind of ongoing, you know, whirlwind of just, yes, I want to get up there. I want to get more successful, more senior, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, why, you know, going back to why can you not feel that joy?
Well, everything in life is balance. And I think to be a successful leader, you know, you have to have drive, and a passion for what you're doing if you're going to do it really well. I think for me, my journey was about the introspection and the connection with self. You know, there's this be do have, which essentially when I for example, make the first million, when I get the first directorship, when I become a CEO, and then I will have all of the money I need, or all of the time that I need, or all of the whatever it is that I need, and then I will be happy. And the reality is, to live a really happy life where you can experience joy, it's the other way round. When you can be, when you can connect with self, when you're more connected with yourself, which isn't complicated, but that doesn't mean it's easy. A lot of people are perhaps frightened of what they might find if they stop and they ask themselves those questions. And I've never known anybody die from feeling the feelings, but the thought of it is frightening, or it was in my case. And so frightening, it was just buried in the subconscious. I didn't think about it. I just went for the next job. You get to my age and you can have it. I think if I was listening to myself maybe 20 years ago, I'd think, what's this guy talking about? But because I was in the thrust of this. And for most people, I can tell you exactly what I'm talking about. Be careful. Be careful that you don't miss out on things. Be careful that I've realized more of my potential as a leader and a chief executive in the last 3 years than the previous 20. And I've had more people as a CEO reporting directly into me connect with me on a different level because I've been more connected with myself. Does that make sense?
It does, yes, it does. I'm sure men listening to this who may be, midway through their careers, and this isn't just about career, but, largely, a lot of men, I think, become trapped in these roles where they're the fixer, they're the provider, the leader. It doesn't mean that, family dynamics have changed over the last, 30 years. But I think a lot of men feel trapped in that role. And therefore, how do they stop and, ask that question of themselves, try and understand what's going on underneath? Because you're at full steam all the time, and you don't think you don't think you got the luxury of some sort of introspective, navel gate, however people may perceive it, as like, well, why would I do that? I'm too busy, doing this, and this.
Yeah. Well, I do some obviously work in that space, but there are, I would say, the easiest place to start is find a men's group. And when I talk about men, it's not to the exclusion of women. It's nothing to do with that. Men being together in a group, being vulnerable, having open conversations, is the dynamic is changed if there are women in the group, and that's many layers of not history, you know what I mean? It's just hereditary stuff behind that. So if you think about it, most of the time when men spend time with men, we're talking about football, we're talking about the business results, we're talking about anything but a deep conversation. So is there a group that you can find, or an elder, somebody that you know and trust, who you can have conversations with about how you're feeling? And of course, you have to stop first of all to and let the noise settle down. It's not to plug it per se, but I work with an organization called True Freedom Leadership, and a big part of the work that we do there is meditation, simple meditations. And there's some on the website. Those can be downloaded for free. So I think the first thing is calming yourself down. Think about it, we spend our lives in our head. We go to school and when you ask, how do you feel, the answer is, What's your gut instinct on this mathematical problem? It's all data. And then we go into the workplace, data, data, data. And certainly in Western societies, we're sort of almost encouraged not to listen to the heart and the gut. And for all of us, all of our answers are in our intuition. All of our answers are in our gut. And this, by the way, as you know, Philip, this is backed by neuroscience. So this is not spiritual woo-woo. When you walk into a room, your heart is taking in infinite amounts more data than your head. And we're only just beginning to understand the gut brain. So we've got three brains, and the gut brain is the strongest. The heart brain sends more messages to the head than the head sends back to the heart. And yet we're using 30% of that system. And it leads in men, typically in particularly leadership roles, it can lead to mental health issues. And in women in leadership roles, it can lead to adrenal fatigue, left unchecked. And something you said earlier, if I might just jump onto, is, what happens for me anyway, is that when you think of your family life, initially with a partner, and then for some of us with children, and you buy a house and you finance that, etc. And you, as the CEO or as the MD or as this leader in business, people say, well, can you sort the mortgage? Can you sort this? Can you sort it? This has gone wrong over here. Yes, 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 yes. Of course I can. Of course I can. Take it in my stride. Take it in my stride. Oh, such and such a person's children's in a problem with this. Could you possibly? Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you end up on this pedestal that you put yourself on, where you're carrying everything. You're the solution to everything. You're capable at one level because of the skills and experience and the passion that you have. But there's no time for yourself. How much time do we spend working on what's the single most important relationship for anybody on the planet? Is a relationship with yourself. How much time do people spend working on the relationship with themselves? And you have to start there. And the other thing is you can't tell yourself everything's okay. You've got to feel into that relationship with self.
So do you think there's a natural point? I mean, you talked about a kind of awakening, if you like, 3 years ago. Is there a natural point in everyone's lives where you do suddenly have that wake up and think, right, actually, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I need to find out what I really need to do. And everything you've just been saying, do we all, I guess the point I'm making is, can you force that, or is it something that kind of happens at a natural point? Do we all come to it at the right point? Or should we force it now?
Philip, that is such a fantastic question. And the answer is, I don't know. There's again, I'm not trying to come up with one quote after another, but, and I think this was Confucius, but it's been put to others. But, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And, my hope in the work that I do, and in doing this today, is that it may accelerate some people's journeys where they get, pricked a little bit earlier than they may have been if they hadn't been. What I would say, for sure, in my opinion, some people never have the awakening. So they get to the end of their career, and within 3 years, they've resigned themselves to 3 or 4 rounds of golf a week. They're surrounded by material wealth. They're still not feeling joy. They're still not sure why. Life's a bit flat. And they become trivialized in their own mind. And that's a terrible thing to happen because, and it's not just leaders, anybody that's lived a life is a pool and a well of experience and knowledge and things that they can share. But I think, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it close up. So I think you asked me the question, is it, can it be accelerated? And the short answer is I don't know. I think the more people that we tell, the more this fantastic podcast, the more that people are passionately sharing their experiences, the more chances that it might land with somebody and they think, that resonates with me. And one of the things I wanted to do this for was that the downside to being a successful leader is everybody thinks you've got everything together. So it's almost embarrassing. You just have this armor around you of everybody telling you how fantastic you are. You tell yourself the same story. If you were, I mean, I don't know, if you were dependent on a substance or something, there might be a degree of sympathy, or I don't know. Bill needs a lift up because he's on his backside, but actually you can be on your backside at the top of the tree. It's just harder to say I'm on the backside.
So, I guess a lot of men out there then are waiting for retirement and thinking that's when it's all going to come good. I'll have reached the apex of my career. I'll have left that behind, and then I'm just going to really enjoy my life, know who I am. But from what you're saying, then is actually there's a danger that unless you work out what it is you really want and who you really are, that retirement doesn't solve anything. It just means you're possibly even more confused because you don't even have the work then.
Absolutely. It's even I think for driven leaders, it's a bigger risk than the next job. It's back to the be, do, have. If you're at work and you're really busy and you think, I need more time to do this, I need more time to do that. Then when I've got more time, when I've got this time, I'll be able to do this stuff. When I'm doing this stuff, then I'll be happy. No. And we talk about, well, I don't, but a lot of people talk about, what's your passion? Everybody's here for a reason, and we get hung up on management books and all of that stuff around what's your purpose, what's your North Star, what's this, what's that, name it, aim for it, bang, 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 back in your head, all in your head. Yeah. So what I say to people is if you're connected with yourself, if you're being, the purpose of life is to be fully present now in this moment. All fear, all worry is either about the past or the future. The purpose of life, to really, really enjoy life, to experience life is to be fully present in this moment. And if you are fully present in the moment, fully connected with yourself, your purpose will reveal itself in the rearview mirror, because you will be doing the things that you were meant to be here for, and you will feel more joy.
So what is, and I know we've talked about this already, but what is the bridge then? If I'm sat here listening to this, I'm in my 50s, but my job's looking good from the outside, everything looks good, but I'm not happy. I'm not really finding joy in very much. How do I cross that chasm? What do I do? Because I want to feel all those things. I want to know what I'm meant to be here for. I want to find joy. I want to find, who I actually am. But how do I do that? I haven't got the tools. I'm panicking. I've no idea. And I don't expect within this podcast you to answer that in great detail. But what are a few things I can do just to start me on that journey?
Well, can I tell you what my journey was? Because I'm not proffering to be an expert in all of the ways that people can deal with this. My journey was, I met a phenomenal coach, a guy called Bodie Aldridge, who's based in Australia. He said some of the things I've said on this podcast. He was giving a talk, and I wasn't expecting to feel the way I did. I then hired him, and the key thing that made a huge difference for me was daily meditation of 5 to 10 minutes. And it wasn't the meditation that I thought. It wasn't about getting out of your body and some, Zen type thing. It's about a really simple practice to connect your head, heart, and your gut. It's about being inside yourself, not worrying about thoughts coming and going, just feeling in the moment. And of course, at first, and there's a science to this as well, but my thinking mind went doolally, fighting like Billy-O, not to calm and calm and calm. But within a couple of weeks, and what Bodhi would say to me is the key thing here is consistency. So don't do 20 minutes if you've missed 10 minutes the following day. You need to do 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day is enough, by the way. Is more than enough to start the journey. And the second thing, which I found extremely helpful alongside that, was journaling. So every day was journaling about my thoughts and my feelings. And one of the first things that came to me was, we all have, well, I think we all have an inner critic. I certainly had an inner critic. So I got this inner critic in my ear. You don't know it's there until you stop. And then when you start journaling, you think, oh my God, this guy's talking to me all day and all night. This is unbelievable. And so you asked, what's the bridge? I think for me, I'd say to anybody out there who is remotely interested, you don't need to hire a coach. You don't need to spend money on the True Freedom Leadership website. There's some free downloads, and they work. You don't need any instruction. Try that for 2 weeks, 5 minutes a day. I'd encourage you to do the same, Philip. Try it for 2 weeks, and you will feel, or in the experience I have of working with people, there's a new serenity, a new focus, a new calmness. And if you can't do, or you don't want to do the meditation, just try doing the journaling. You don't want to do it because everybody's journey is their own. But these are techniques to slow the mind and become more aware of these internal thought patterns and stories that we're telling ourselves. And I work with people who say, oh, yeah, I'll go for a bike ride and I play golf and I go walking, walk the dog and do things like that. That's not it. Because as soon as you go out on a bike ride, you're doing something. So this is about doing nothing. And that's what we avoid.
So are you trying to, you talked about these three, areas within your body, your brain, your heart and your gut, I think you said. So are you trying to quieten your brain and listen more to your heart, which is your instincts, your gut instincts, and everything else you're picking up that's perhaps not as tangible as in your head. But what's happening in your gut then? What is that third space?
Yeah, so actually, well, just to correct you, so your head, think of your head as your thinking brain. Your heart is your feeling brain. So that's where you're picking up all of your feelings. And your gut is your intuitive brain. So that's your gut instinct is you just know. Yeah, your feeling brain is, oh, this feels right, this feels wrong. And your thinking brain is, give me the data and I'll assimilate. So it's about using all three. But if the best analogy for our busy heads, busy heads, for leaders and owners, mentally busy heads, crazy stuff going on right now with AI and everything that's coming in and what's next. Oh my God. Is, how do you stop a fast moving train? You don't stand in front of it. You need to get on it and slowly put the brakes on. So slowing down this head, because the heart brain and the gut brain, they're there. They're perfectly formed and they're ticking away. You just tuned out of them.
So what's the relationship now then with finding joy? You've got to this place, you're using meditation or other sorts of tools, and you're getting out of your head more and listening to your heart and your gut. And now I now understand where the term gut feel comes from. It suddenly makes sense. So how does that then equate to suddenly finding joy? Not finding, but appreciating the good stuff and, being able to embrace the joy.
Well, Philip, there's another great question. So the first thing is, this joy is a sensation and a feeling, isn't it? Yeah. And if I'll use this analogy again, I'm not sure, is if you imagine that there's a pool of joy sitting in your intuition, and the more that you connect, the more it seeps through. And I'm not saying I've never used that term before. I'm just responding to your question. Is that, we're often, what are we told about, be happy or do something that brings you joy. It is a very common thing. How about bringing joy to everything that you do? That's where a happy life is. And by the way, the work that I've done, and there are other people doing work in this space, you don't become joy and life is pure joy forever and nothing. You can't know joy if you don't experience pain. You can't be happy if you haven't experienced sadness. So life will continue. And if you think about what leaders do, I did this. And what we're expected to do as leaders is we turn up for life and we grow these companies. And then you want to be sitting in an air-conditioned captain's sort of galley, and the waves come along and you switch on the stabilizers and the boat just sails through life and everybody's comfortable and the leader's God's gift to everything. It's a myth. Really in life, you're sitting on your own kayak and you're going to go up and down those waves. You're going to be turned upside down. You're going to be hanging on at times and you're going to be surfing a wave at other times. So the essence of what I'm talking about here is the depth of the feelings and the sensation and the connectedness that you will feel, the feeling of less stress in the shoulders, less amount of whir in the head going on and on and on. And then the universe kicks in, universal energy. And again, none of this is not proven with science to say fundamentally we're all energy and we're all connected. Everything is connected. And so connecting with your intuition and slowing down the head brings the joy, brings the feeling and the sensations of being more present in the moment. And that's where, whenever you hear really successful athletes being interviewed about flow, you're in a flow state, you're achieving this incredible. We've probably all experienced it. I've experienced it. And in those states of flow, one of the common things that is said by successful people or successful sportsmen is, well, what do you remember thinking about what you were doing? And they say, no, I was just in the moment. I was completely present, totally in the moment. Got a colleague in Australia who's a silver medal-winning player in the Australian hockey team, and one of the things that he said was, there are times when in the game, if his head's getting really busy, he just stops and looks at the game that's going on around him, and that's when you anticipate what's going to happen. You feel into what's going to happen next, rather than trying to think it.
I guess, you've got men listening to this who they might feel trapped by work, on this conveyor belt that they kind of want to be on. Other responsibilities, maybe they've got children, maybe they haven't, maybe they've got aging parents, the responsibility that comes from that, general stress and pressure. And as you said, you're looking, a lot of the times you're looking forward, you're trying to think, second guess, how am I going to cope? So people, someone listening to this thinking, well, this is me, but I don't know how to stop living like this. We've talked a lot about what you can do, but I guess, just to reiterate, what could that man listening do? Just because
I think the first question to ask yourself is, how committed am I to doing something about it? Because, that there will be, there's barriers for you to do something about it, because if there wasn't barriers, you'd have done something. Now, usually, in my experience, it's because people are getting further and further up the ladder and still not feeling what they expected to feel. And so, if you have the conversation, how and what's it costing you? What's the cost to you of doing nothing? And I think one of the things that, in my experience, is because the cost didn't feel like a cost, you just carry on. Because you're just in that treadmill. And it's only when you're getting closer to what you thought was going to be, your question earlier is, a lot of us, it's about the next job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when that starts running out of steam, it becomes about retirement. Well, I'll take on retirement and a couple of high-profile non-exec jobs, and I'll be an advisor, and I'll do some, and then I'll be happy. Well, we've covered the ground there. So I think asking yourself the question, what's it costing you, and what are you willing to do? Because, if you're not willing to make any changes, then nothing's going to change. And I say one other thing, which is, I think I know what I experience with some people in the work I do is that leaders particularly will say, I don't want to lose my edge. I don't want to lose my drive. I don't want to lose my business owners. Don't want to, if I get softer, things will stop working, whether it's at home or whether it's in the workplace. And the best, in fact, I'll give you the best. I remember when my wife Liz was pregnant with our first daughter, Elsie, and one of the kind of things I was really frightened about was, I was so passionate about my career and being driven and everything else, and I thought, I'm really looking forward to becoming a dad, but equally, will I still be as driven? Will I still be as much of a leader? And of course, the moment that Elsie was born, and then we had another daughter, it was the same thing, is that, or less, because you know what's going to happen, but is, first of all, my drive, my passion for my career was exactly the same. It didn't change one bit, with one exception. It didn't matter anymore. Yeah, so it was kind of, okay, here's these two, this is the reason, that's the reason for being. So I'm still driven, I'm still on the treadmill, I'm still doing all of those things, I'm still an effective leader, I'm still growing, but it doesn't matter anymore. So I tell you that story because I think for anybody that's out there thinking, I'd love to do this work, I'd love to dip a toe in the water and just have a feel into what the possibilities are for me, because I'm not really sure I've got a problem, but I haven't felt joy before and I never feel like I can stop. And if I really stopped, I'm not happy, and I've got nothing to be unhappy about. So I can't really talk to anyone, and I don't want to be less of a leader. I don't want to not be able to hold the company up and be driven and do all of those things. It doesn't happen that way. You don't suddenly have a come to Jesus moment and disappear off to be a Buddhist monk. That's just not it. You become more effective as a leader, more effective as a human being, and more connected to yourself and to everything around you. And you live more in the moment. Doesn't mean you don't plan for the future, and it doesn't mean you're not aware of the past, but you're more aware of the inner critic. You're more aware of the stories you're telling yourself. You have more awareness of your subconscious, which is 90%. Again, I'll stop saying all of this stuff is scientifically backed. 90% of your daily thinking is your subconscious brain. And 60 to 80% of those thoughts are negative.
So the subtitle to this conversation could be, what really matters. It's a phrase you used just now. That's that. If you want to translate this into terminology which everybody can understand, that phrase, what really matters, is that what we should be asking ourselves? And I guess now is the end of that sentence if we want to live in the present.
The other side of this work, the steps of this journey, is more love, peace, and joy. There's more love, peace, and joy waiting for everyone. And that's a journey that never ends. But you want to access more of that peace, you need to do the work on yourself. My personal experience of leaders in particular, having been there myself and then have worked with many, is that we have very little compassion for ourselves. We're very hard on ourselves. I worked with one guy who said, if I had a friend who spoke to me in the way that I speak to myself, I'd stop being a friend. I wouldn't want to see them again because they're devastating in the way that they talk to me. They're horrible. And so it starts, and Philip, when I work with people, and as I've said, you asked me where to start. There's lots of places to start. Is like things start happening when people do the regular reps, 5 minutes a day and some journaling, things start happening. And the first thing they'll say is, that's a coincidence. It can't, to themselves, it can't be this easy. It can't be this easy. And just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. You do these daily practices, and I'm speaking from experience. I'm speaking from supporting people and working with people, and I've seen the impact. Can it be accelerated? I don't know. What I hope through this interview and others, you've had some other similar conversations, is the more men that become more aware of this stuff that's out there, I think then there's more possibility that people might say, oh, do you know what? I just have a look at that because I just feel flat, and I don't know why I feel flat, and I shouldn't feel flat. And I can't tell anybody I feel flat because it looks like everything's brilliant and I'm on top of everything. Where do I go?
Well, Bill, I think you've given us plenty of examples of how you can start feeling joy, actual practical things you can do as well. Thank you very much for sharing that. I'll put the links as well to the free meditation that people can try if you've never tried it before. That's 3 minutes, 7 minutes. I mean, just
yes.
try them. You've got nothing to lose.
I think it's 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. There's a couple on there.
But thank you for talking to me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me on, and to the listeners, I hope it's been a useful insight. And I wish you all more connection, more love, more peace, more joy, because it's waiting for you.
If anyone wants to contact you, Bill, can they contact you? How would they do that? What's your website?
It's bwaadvisory.com.
Okay, we'll put that.
bwaadvisory.com.
So if people want to contact you, they just go there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. If you want to find out more about Bill, then visit his website, www.bwaadvisory.com. And to access the 3 free foundational meditations that Bill references, visit the True Freedom Leadership website, which is www.truefreedomleadership.com, and fill in the form on the About page. To help raise the profile of the podcast, please do review and follow the show on your podcast platform. Please share it with your networks and people you think might benefit from listening. Finally, if you have a story to share, then do contact me through the website mid-lifemen.com.